Jagovinda was around.
Yeah. So we'll get to hear all the stories. The report.
You haven't heard any early ones yet, huh?
Not really, no. I mean, I've looked a little bit at the photos, and I've heard a little bit of Vaikanas Maharaj and Bhagavad Maharaj speaking on a video on Facebook. Yeah. But, we'll hear from the devotees who were there, all the details.
What was the number of attendees?
Well, I don't know. I don't know exactly, but Vaikanas Maharaj mentioned maybe there's 50 people here.
Okay.
He mentioned that, because they're talking about the future and the potential of the project. I think that was the theme of the festival and how preaching mission should go on and they should get well established and then expand,
It'll be interesting to see how they were received by the locals.
Yeah. Yeah. There'll be a lot of interesting things to see what happens. But I think they're very sincere. And I also spoke on the phone like last week with Rasik Mohan. He was inviting me to come. He said, we would pay your ticket and everything. I just didn't feel up to it. But I told, I'm completely supporting. It's a very wonderful project at such a very unique time also.
Yes.
But we will find out in course of time.
Do they have any plans of like gardening or growing food or anything?
That I don't know.
Are you on your way or should
I think
put the phone there?
ultimately, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, they have land. Ultimately. But first they have to make devotees and they have to get established. It's just the opening. I did see photos of the murti that was sent of Srila Prabhupada, life-size murti, from Premananda Prabhu's place, Radhe Kunj.
Yes, that's.
I think it's the same murti that they had there, and they sent that one. I think so. Yeah, I think so. And then they'll get another. Those are the murtis that are made by the artists in Mayapur or Navadvip there. The ones that did all the dioramas and everything. Yeah. So.
I wonder how Prabhupada travels when he goes from Navadvip to Vrindavan. They get him a train seat or something?
Probably in the car. They have cars.
Oh, that's nice.
They have their own.
Nice long drive.
Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahabhadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Trishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jayatam Suruto Pangor Mama Mandamateragati Mat Sarvasva Padambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpa Drumadha Srimad Ratanagar Singhasanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Preshtalibhi Sevyamano Smarami Shivan Rasarasaram Vam Shivata Tatakstitaha Karshan Venu Swanair Gopir Gopinata Shriyestunaha Bhaktya Vihina Aparadha Lakshai Kshiptascha Kamari Taranga Madhye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapanna Brinde Namaste Charanara Vindam Vrindai Tulsi Debai Priyai Keshavasya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Well, first of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhara Goswami Maharaj, and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. My Dandavat Pranams to all my Shri Shri Rupa Nuga Gauriya Guru Varga. My Dandavat Pranams to all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. So we're still discussing the list. You remember the list?
The 7 undesirable associations.
That's right. Right.
And we're on the third or fourth.
Let's see. Well, we read yesterday about people who associate with materialists. What are they called? Vishayi Sangis. We read that. Remember, there are 2 types of sense enjoyers and those who associate with sense enjoyers. 1, those who have made Bhagavan part of their sense gratification, and 2, those whose sense gratification is for Bhagavan. Right? The association of the second type of materialist is somewhat better than association with the first. Although materialists who enjoy pious sense gratification are better than sinful materialists, materialists who enjoy pious sense gratification are better than sinful materialists. A practicing devotee, he should not associate with them until they become favorably inclined towards Sri Krishna. Simply dressing as a renunciant does not enable one to develop a natural detachment from sense objects. Even renunciants are often seen to collect objects of sense gratification. On the other hand, there are people surrounded by sense objects. There are people surrounded by sense objects who appear to be materialists, but who internally adopt yukta vairagya. So what is yukta vairagya?
Appropriate renunciation.
And what form and shape does that take?
To use things to dedicate to the service of Sri Krishna, rather than just rejecting them when they can be used for his pleasure.
It means accepting everything favorable for the service of Bhagavan. So, there are such people. They're surrounded by sense objects, and they appear to be materialists. But really, internally, they have adopted Yukta Vairagya, and they are fully absorbed in Bhagavad Bhajan. So after carefully contemplating these topics, the sadhak should give up the association of Vishayis and Vishayi Sangis, and should perform bhajan either in solitude or, if he is fortunate enough, in the association of saintly persons. And then the fourth and fifth ones of this list of 7 is the opposite gender and those who illicitly associate with the opposite gender. Male sadhakas should not inappropriately associate with women, and female sadhikas, actually sadhaka and sadhika, okay? Female sadhikas should not inappropriately associate with men. It is very harmful for those engaged in spiritual practice. Men and women are of 2 types. The contact and the communication between a couple that is married in accordance with Vedic rules and regulations is not sinful, but it is considered to be pious, as it is in accordance with scriptural injunctions. But when such conduct takes place with a mutual attachment that transgresses the rules pertaining to one's duty, then it is considered Yoshit Sangha for men and Purusha Sangha for women. So what happened to that pious and in accordance with scriptural injunctions association? What took place?
The couple transgresses the regulations meant for proper grihastha ashram.
Right. And both of them are mutually attached to that. So this type of association, it is very harmful for those who perform or desire to perform Bhagavad Bhajan. If the spouse of a person practicing bhakti is guilty of inappropriate association, sangha dosha, then it becomes an obstacle for that person. So, if the spouse of a person practicing bhakti is guilty of inappropriate association, sangha dosha, it becomes an obstacle for that person. If a wife helps her husband in bhakti sadhana, then associating with her cannot be called yoshit sangha. But if she creates obstacles in his bhakti sadhana, then he should give up her association through sincere endeavors. The wife of Sri Ramanujacharya had a very quarrelsome nature. You remember this story? No? Okay. Gurudev told about this. It's live?
Yeah.
It's already, okay. Yeah. So, she had a very quarrelsome nature, and she used to create many obstacles in his practice of bhakti. Initially, Ramanuja made great endeavors to correct her. But when he was unsuccessful, he left his house and her, and he departed for Sri Rangam. For us, Sri Ramanujacharya's character is ideal and worthy of emulation. Although some men are not married, they illicitly converse with women. This behavior is considered Yoshit Sangha or Stri Sangha and is most abominable. One should thus attentively give up Yoshit Sangha and the association of Yoshit Sangis. Now, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 31, verse 35. That would be Lord Kapiladev's teachings. It says, Na tatasya bhaven moho bandhaschanya prasangataha yoshit sangha yata pumso yata tatsangi sangataha. Oh, I remember this now. You'll remember by the translation. It's talking about the illusion and bondage that affects the conditioned soul in this world. And here, Lord Kapiladeva is saying the illusion and the bondage resulting from attachment to a woman or to association of those who are fond of women is unlike that of attachment to any other object. Yes. There's another verse that comes where he says, there is no greater illusion of attachment than that of my creation of the form of the woman. So now, regarding the above-mentioned situation, it is not opposed to bhakti for a household or sadhak to touch or converse with his wife. On the other hand, a renunciant who has left his house should neither touch nor converse with women under any circumstance. Okay, that completes that section, but there's this number 6a of this section now. It's getting into more deeper understanding. 6a, those who make a show of adopting religious principles. Now here's the first type. Yes, because you remember? Dharma Dvajis. Dharma Dvajis. When they're giving the list of, 7 types, then in the 6th type, there were 2 types. So, deceitful persons who adopt the external signs of Dharma, but they do not follow Dharma themselves. They're called Dharma Dvajis. So what does the term Dharma Dvaji mean? Dvaji means holding a flag. Those waving a flag of religiosity. So, they're deceitful persons. They're adopting the external signs of Dharma, but they do not follow Dharma themselves. They're called Dharma Dvajis. And they are to always be avoided. They are of 2 types of Dharma Dvajis. The deceitful ones and the foolish ones. Or the cheaters and the cheated. It is considered contemptible, even within the realms of jnana and karma, to make a show of following Dharma, but not actually following it. It's deceitfulness. But in the realm of bhakti, it is the means of utter ruin for the living entity. So, what is he telling here of this comparison? A person who's acting as a Dharma Dvaji, right? They do that also in the realm of jnana and karma. And, they make a show, and it is considered contemptible, even within those realms. It's contemptible to be deceitful and be a Dharma Dvaji, right? In those realms, karma kanda, jnana kanda. But in the realm of bhakti, it is the means of utter ruin for the living entity. This is a very interesting point. There is no association in this world as bad as that of Dharma Dvajis. Whoa. Even materialists are better. For the sake of their own interests, Dharma Dvajis deceive foolish persons by outwardly bearing religious symbolism. Some of these rascals become gurus, and thus they make disciples and gather money, kanaka, women, kamani, and prestige, pratishta. Remaining far from the deceitful trickery of such persons, a sadhak is to perform Bhagavad bhajan without duplicity. Such non-duplicitous bhajan is the only means to attain Bhagavan. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.3.38 states, Saveda dhatu padavim parasya duranta viryasya ratanga pane yo mayaya santatayanu vajeta tat pada saroja bandham. First canto, third chapter, verse 38. The strength and the valor of Bhagavan, who carries the wheel of a chariot in his hand, they are unlimited. His strength and his valor of Bhagavan, who carries the wheel of a chariot in his hand, are unlimited. No one can understand their depth. Although he is the creator of the whole world, he is completely beyond it. Only those who render uninterrupted service to his lotus feet without duplicity can understand his form and the mystery of his pastimes. Yes. You have to look at the synonyms, but this is why he's quoting this verse, because the Bhagavatam itself is saying only those persons who render uninterrupted service to his lotus feet without duplicity. That's why it's being quoted in this context of duplicitous. Such non-duplicitous bhajan is the only means to attain Bhagavan. And then he quotes another verse from the second canto, 7th chapter, 42, in the same context. He says, this verse from Bhagavatam, Yesham Saesha Bhagavan Dayaye Dananta Sarvat Manashrita Pado Yadinir Vyalikam Te Dushtaram Atitaranti Chadeva Mayam Naisham Mamaham Itidi Shvashrigala Bhakshye. The unlimited Bhagavan himself bestows mercy upon those who surrender everything to his lotus feet without duplicity. Only the recipients of his mercy cross over insurmountable Maya, not those who possess the conception of I and mine in regard to the body, which is destined to be food for dogs and jackals. That's the Bhagavatam verse. So here it's being stressed in these verses. The Lord only gives his mercy to those who perform one-pointed, incessant bhajan without duplicity. Yeah.
Is the foolish Dharmadvaji duplicitous also, or is he just misled?
More misled. But somebody that can be misled is also full of a certain degree of duplicitousness. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
The fact that they're susceptible to being misled and cheated and so forth. So, that's why I can say in this context, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj's famous 3-word statement. I love this statement. Sincerity is invincible. Sincerity. He talked a lot about that. Because it's the opposite of duplicitousness, right? Sincerity means honesty, truthfulness, right? The whole of Srimad Bhagavatam is for those who are nirmat saranam. They have no envy, no duplicity in their heart like this. So, yeah, it is the cause of utter ruination, we read, in the path of bhakti, to be a dharma dvaji in the path of bhakti. So who is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur referring to? Because at his time, it was in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And what were the circumstances?
So there were prakrita sahajas, so those who put on the dress of Vaishnavas, but are engaged in illicit activities, then it's not just that they transgress social codes, but they actually make aparadha, the lotus feet, the divine couple.
Yeah. It was, the whole society was rife with such devious persons in the dress of sadhus. I know Srila Prabhupada, I was listening today to I've been listening to a series of his lectures, one after the other, on the disappearance and appearance days of his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Wonderful, wonderful lectures. Incredible. And he was telling the story, I've heard it a few different times now, of how he was pulled by his intimate friend to come to see Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But he was very reluctant. He didn't want to. And he explained why. Because he said the so-called sadhus at that time, they did not impress me at all. And he said, my father, he was inviting so many. So Srila Prabhupada witnessed over many, many years throngs of such sadhus. But Srila Prabhupada's father, he didn't discriminate, really. Just any person, he invited them in. And you know what he asked him? He made a request to all of those persons after feeding them and hosting them and like that. And he did this daily. Prabhupada's father requested them, whatever they happen to be, whatever level. He asked them each and every time for a benediction. And what was that benediction?
To bless that my son will have the blessings of Srimati Radharani.
Become a great devotee of Srimati Radharani. Yeah. Oh, he was a pure Vaishnava. And he also, Prabhupada's father, he was also not impressed with a lot of these Prakrita Sahajiyas and so forth. And Prabhupada also told the story. I was hearing that on the tape because he was telling a lot about his life and how, the Gaudiya Math persons who he had seen in his first meetings in 1922 with Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So he saw these are the people from the Gaudiya Math. But some years went by, and in the meantime, Prabhupada established his Prayag pharmacy in Allahabad, right? And of course, his father was living in the household at that time, and Prabhupada was hosting these persons, the sadhus, and some of those sadhus, amongst them, a lot of them were disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of course, most of them, in fact. But this is also after the disappearance. First, before the disappearance. It was like 1928, he said. And they came, and his father also didn't want to come downstairs to see them. But, because he was thinking that they were, that level of Dharma Dvaji sadhus. But when these are the Gaudiya Math persons, then he immediately came, paid his dandavats. So discrimination is necessary, especially in the light, as is being pointed out here, of persons who are posing as gurus. They're the worst of all. This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur said. They're the greatest, worst association of all.
There's the verse in the Shri Upanishads about
Yeah.
that also.
That's right. We remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something like Asura ta namate loka. Where did that go? Asurya namate loka. No, it's been too long.
I don't remember.
But they go to the darkest region of ignorance,
Yes.
and we're still.
Mm.
Well, I forget how it goes.
Yeah. But those who are
Yes.
pretending to
Those who are misguiding and misleading the other persons go even worse. Yeah. You were saying?
Well, I was going to ask a question. You see, like even in the news, that the biggest leaders, like of the Christian evangelicals, their number one leaders, this happens over and over again.
Yeah.
And I guess it happens, even we've seen it within institutional societies of our own sect of Krishna consciousness.
Right.
That when they reach a high position but are unqualified, it's like inevitable they go specifically to that, to having not just a connection with the opposite gender, but extremely bizarre and illicit, and then they get exposed.
Right.
And then it becomes a source of
Well, in
great
India,
confusion.
it's very commonplace.
But it's
Big
always
ones who have like lakhs and even millions of followers, right?
But it's always that one fall down that
Yeah.
exposes them. It's like
Right.
like Maya's taking them down for her protection of the Pure Land, so no one.
Mhm. Certainly. After all, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said this is the age of the cheaters and the cheated. And so we should know that the majority of persons are going to be in that category, right? And they even mix in with the pure lines of pure Vaishnavas. They mix in there as well. There's a tendency. But one thing we should know, that, as you're pointing out, this is the common way of, they all fall down in that way. Why? Because Kanaka Kamani Pratishta Bhagani. These three things, they are the adverse and very dangerous elements. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada wrote that whole long song. The one, Vaishnava K, oh my dear mind, what kind of Vaishnava are you? The whole entire song, verse after verse, is trying to expose the cheating tendency. And Raghunath Das Goswami's Manasiksha, at least about 5 verses are dedicated to addressing that tendency to cheat, to be, devious, like kapati, kutinati, deceit. It has to be rooted out of the heart. It can only be done by association, by pure, honest, sincere surrender to the exalted, pure devotees. But we see in almost all of the cases of the cheating Dharma Dvaji types that get exposed eventually, they're not really situated in any pure line. But even those coming in the pure line, as you pointed out, yes, if they have those tendencies, they will eventually fall down and they'll be exposed.
Is this specifically a problem in Kali Yuga, or did it exist in previous ages?
Yeah, of course it is in Kali Yuga specifically. It's not that it's not there, because that's the tendencies of the conditioned souls, the demoniac tendency to become the enjoyer, right? But because, after all, what are the symptoms of the Kali Yuga? We heard that from the first chapter of the Bhagavatam when the sages were pointing it out. Okay? The people are not as susceptible in other yugas. There's more purity, dharma, the 4 legs of the bull. It's much better, much more firmly grounded, okay? But in the Kali Yuga, there's only, what? One leg of the 4 legs of the bull of Dharma.
And that's wobbling.
That's wobbling.
People
And what is that?
Short-lived, misguided.
Yes, yes. Short-lived,
Unfortunate.
lazy, misguided, right. Manda, well, the short-lived is in the beginning. Their lives are short. Kalavasman yuge janaha. Prayana alpa ayusha. Prayana alpa payusha means alpa, means very short, very little. Ayusha means the length of your lifespan. So alpa ayusha, that's the first symptom they point out. People are short-lived. Then manda, sumanda matayo, manda bhagya upadruta. Manda means lazy. Sumanda matayo means misguided. Manda bhagya means unfortunate. And upadruta means always disturbed. So those were the symptoms. They weren't present. That's why they came out. Kali was coming now. This is going to be the way the human society is in Kali Yuga. So there's more, than those sages could practically probably have imagined, And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, during his time, he pointed out 13 specific types of these apasampradayas, and they're all named in one of his poems. And then Param Gurudev Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, he noticed 33 different varieties. We could definitely add many more to them that have come about and have manifested in the more recent. Yeah, so I mean, it's very rare, right? Whose mission gets distributed. And as Krishna sends more and more exalted souls who will be living examples and will guide the masses of people in that direction. So those people will be rooted out more and more. But the meeting between Maharaj Parikshit and Maharaj Kali, the bogus king, right? That was showing what's going to be taking place. And so that's why we see that the mass of people throughout the world for hundreds of years, they've just fallen into complete decadence. They don't follow these principles, right? No meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication. Remember the story, even during the British period in India, the disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj, very exalted personality. Went to England for preaching. There was one Lord Zetland, right? He liked to associate with the mission of Gaudiya Math. And while he was preaching there in England, that person asked to him, Lord Zetland asked to Goswami Maharaj, he said, can you make me a Brahmana? Can you make me into a Brahmana? Because he was familiar with the caste system in India, and the Brahmins are the pure ones, and they have knowledge and all of this. And Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj answered, yes, we can, provided you will have to follow certain principles. And he said, well, what are those principles? And then he named them, the 4 regulative principles, right? Even including tea, cigarettes, all of this. And what was his response?
Impossible.
Yes. And this is amongst the upper class, wealthy class, who are even pious. See? So that's because of Kali Maharaj. And there's always a battle in the Kali Yuga against Kali Maharaj. But one interesting thing, which was pointed out by Bhakti Swarup Sridhar Maharaj, in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, there's a little section there, and it's describing how Kali Maharaj actually likes Harinam Sankirtan. Did you know that? You heard that?
No.
Yeah. He likes Harinam Sankirtan. So that's, you see, Mahaprabhu's movement. It will defeat, ultimately, all the ill effects of Kali Yuga. But it doesn't mean that all the people are going to become Vaishnavas. It doesn't mean that. Even Prabhupada told. But they will know about Mahaprabhu. They'll hear about him. There'll be such influence on the planet that they'll become, it'll help them, they'll advance, you know. Mahaprabhu did not descend on this planet for nothing, you know, just to influence the world for a couple hundred years. No. This is for the entire Kali Yuga. For the entire, and there are 432,000 years remaining. So Mahaprabhu's influence will be there all throughout this Danya Kali Yuga. Now, okay, 6b. What was the 6a again? Let's remind ourselves. 6a is those who make a show of adopting religious principles, the first type, Dharmadvajis. Now comes 6b, those who make a show of following religious principles, the second type. Now that kind of sounds similar. Those, 6a, those who make a show of adopting religious principles, the first type. Oh, okay. And those who make a show of, it's the same. The second type. Okay, so what was the first type? The Dharmadvajis. Now the second type. When one internally maintains faith in Mayavad and externally exhibits the mood of identifying as a Vaishnava, it is called duplicitous Vaishnavism, Kapata Vaishnavata. Kapata. In Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, the following verses are mentioned in relation to such a Vaishnava whose name was Ramdas. Now this is from the Antya Lila 13th chapter. Here's the verses. Ashta Prahar Ram Nama Japin Ratri Dine Sarva Tyaji Chalila Jagannatha Darshane. Ram Das chanted for 24 hours, the entire day and night, and gave up everything as he journeyed for darshan of Sri Jagannath. Now 2 more verses. Ramdas Jadi Pratam Prabhure Milila Mahaprabhu Adiktare Kripa Nakorila Antare Mumukshuteho Vidya Garvavan Sarva Chitta Gyata Prabhu Sarvagya Bhagavan. So this is saying that when he first met, even though he was chanting 24 hours a day, when he first met Srimad Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu did not bestow extensive mercy upon him. Ramdas desired liberation. And he was conceited due to his learning. But because Mahaprabhu is Bhagavan and all cognizant, he knows the hearts of all. Thus, in order to perform pure Hari Bhajan, one must give up the association of Dharma Dvajis. The majority of people in this world are in the category of Dharma Dvajis. Therefore, as long as one does not come into the association of those who are pure, it is more beneficial to spend one's life in seclusion and engage in bhajan and sadhana. So there we have it. This is a whole story from the Antya Lila of this person, Ram Das. But what did Mahaprabhu detect? Because he was chanting 24 hours. He would chant the entire day and night. He gave up everything as he journeyed for darshan of Jagannath. But when he first met Srimad Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu did not bestow extensive mercy upon him. Internally, Ram Das desired liberation.
Is that one of the 5 types of liberation or impersonal?
Mostly, it usually refers to impersonal liberation. And it refers to Mayavadism. And not only that, but he was also very conceited, very proud, due to his learning. But because Mahaprabhu is Bhagavan and all cognizant, he knows the hearts of all. So, now we come to the 7th category. These are all categories of what? Which of the 6 things that should be avoided, just to review. There are 6 things that must be avoided because they will cause bhakti to actually be destroyed.
This is undesirable association.
Well, the 5th one, right?
Yeah, right. The first is called Janasanga.
Yes.
Atyahara, Prayashascha, Prajalpa, Niyamagraha, Janasanga. Right? So this is all in the category of Janasanga, the 7 types. We come to the 7th type now. That should all be avoided. Janasanga. Uncivilized and foolish persons of atrocious conduct. Yeah. It doesn't have the Sanskrit. It's quite an impressive title. Atrocious conduct. Uncivilized and foolish persons of atrocious conduct. The 7th type of Janasanga. Associating with foolish, uncivilized persons whose views and conduct are disgraceful, that destroys bhakti. Their views and their conduct is disgraceful. So that destroys bhakti. Foolish persons with an uncivilized nature kill animals and eat their meat, drink wine, and do not observe varnashram dharma. Uncivilized nature. Foolish persons with uncivilized nature. Their character is always lacking in discipline. The association of such persons of bad character, namely duracharis, bad character, the association of such persons of bad character contaminates the consciousness. But if a person born in a family that does not follow Vedic conduct displays faith in and a serious taste for bhakti, one should associate with him. In taking his association, one need not fear inauspiciousness. He should still be considered a sadhu, even if he sometimes exhibits inappropriate behavior due to his previous nature and his previous impressions, samskaras. Srimad Bhagavad Gita 9:30 and 31 has determined this in clear words. Apichet sudaracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadur eva samantavya samyag vyavasito hi saha. And then the next verse after that, well, first of all, Krishna is saying in this verse 30, even if a man of abominable character engages in exclusive devotion to me, he is still to be considered a sadhu because his intelligence is firmly fixed in bhakti to me. And then Krishna goes on and says, Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvas chantim nigacchati kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. So Krishna says, that person, he quickly becomes virtuous and he attains eternal peace. O Kaunteya, boldly proclaim that my devotee never perishes. So the essence here is that if a person with an uncivilized nature and ill character develops faith in unalloyed devotion, ananya bhakti, due to some spiritual merit, sukriti, then he is worthy of being considered a sadhu, because he will become righteous, dharmatma, in only a short time. Initially, for a few days, one may witness some ill behavior in him that has resulted from his previous impressions, but still, he should be considered a sadhu. The association of such bad association. Bhagavatam 11th canto, chapter 20, verses 27 through 29, mentions their symptoms of these persons. This is the verse I was actually looking for. Yes, this is the verses that I was looking for, where Krishna is explaining in the 20th chapter of 11th canto how that such a devotee who's being told here that he's a bhakta, but sometimes he falls down, right? Or does durachar, apichet sudaracharo. But what kind of bhakta is he? Bhajate mam ananya bhak. He is an ananya bhakta. But because of past previous impressions, he may have fallen in a certain way. So Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, this is very interesting verses here. I was trying to remember this the other day, and I said, oh, I'll remember it, I'll find it. But it found me just now. So, here's the 3 verses. Jata shradho mat katasu, nirvinna sarva karmasu, veda dukatmakam kaman parityage pya anishwaraha. Tato bhajeta mam prita, shradha lor dridha nishchaya, jushamanas chatan kaman, dukko darkams chagarhayan. Proktena bhakti yogena, bhajato masakrin mune, kama hridaya nashyanti sarve mai hridistite. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is going to give the gist of those verses. But before we hear that, I'm going to read directly the translation of those verses. Okay? Good old pocket Vedas. Yes. So, Srimad Bhagavatam 11. 11:20. Verses 27 through 29. Okay, here's the translation. Jata shradha mat katasu. Having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories. Jata shradha means his shradha has been awakened. In what? Mat katasu. Narration of my glories. Now, being disgusted with all material activities. Knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. And even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, and he sincerely repents such activities. So, Garhaya, Jushamano Chatat Kaman Dukko Udarkan Chagarhaya. Dukko Udarkan. He knows, he's aware of this, that all these attempts to enjoy sense gratification lead to misery. He's firmly convinced of this. He has Shraddha. So, although he is unable to renounce them, Parityage hi api anishvara. Parityag means to renounce. Api anishvara. Anishvara means he's not Ishvara. He doesn't have the power to control. So he's anishvara. He's unable to renounce. He knows Veda dukkha atmakam kaman. He knows Veda dukkha atmakam kaman. All types of sense gratification lead to suffering. He knows this. And jata shraddha matkatasu. This is a person who has awakened Shraddha in the glories of Sri Krishna Katha. And he's also nirvinna sarva karmasu. Nirvinna means disgusted. He's actually disgusted with all material activities. And he knows Veda dukkha atmakam kaman. He knows that all these activities lead to suffering. Dukkha. Parityagehi api anishvara. Although he is unable, he's still unable to give them up. Now what happens? Tato bhajeta mam prita. Tato, with such faith as this, bhajeta mam prita, he remains happy in worshipping me. Okay, he remains happy. Shraddhalur dridha nishchaya. He has firm conviction and very firm faith. Jushamanas chatan kaman. Still, sometimes he is engaged in that sense gratification that he understands is only going to cause suffering, but dukkho darkam chagarhayan. He repents, condemns himself. Now I'll go to the third verse that's being quoted, because there's 3 verses, 27 through 29. Now, this 29th verse, it says, Proktena bhakti yogena bhajato masa krim mune kama hridaya nashyanti sarve mai hridi stite. When an intelligent person engages constantly in my worship, bhakti yogena, bhajata. Asakrit means constantly. So when such an intelligent person, muni, he engages constantly in worshipping me through the loving devotional service as described by me, his heart becomes firmly situated in me, and thus all material desires within the heart are destroyed. That's the 3rd verse. So, kama hridaya nashyanti. Nashyanti means destroyed. All those kama, those material desires, hridaya, in the heart, nashyanti, they're destroyed. Sarve mai hridi stite. He becomes firmly situated in such bhakti yoga to me. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is now giving the gist of these verses. He says, The gist of these verses is that the association of persons who are averse to Bhagavan and sinful by nature is definitely abominable. But their association would be abominable even if they were pious, because they're averse to Bhagavan. Even if they were pious, their association would be abominable. But on the other hand, the association of persons who are dedicated, unmukha, to Bhagavan, but outwardly they seem to be sinful, that association is also satsanga. This does not apply to those who are averse, vimukha, to Bhagavan. So Maharshi Katyayana, there's a Maharshi Katyayana, is quoted, the Katyayana Samhita in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Rupa Goswami has quoted this verse. Varam huta vala vaha jvala panjarantara vyavastiti na shori chinta vimukha janasamvasa vaishasam. We've heard this verse before. We've heard the translation many times in our study of nectar of devotion and so forth. He's saying, it is better to be burned in fire or to spend a lifetime imprisoned than to suffer the pain of associating with persons who are averse to Krishna. Vimukha, vimukha, they're averse. Shauri. Shauri means who? Krishna, that's his name. Hari Shauri. We have a godbrother named that. They called him Hari Sari, but it's Shauri, Krishna's name. In the practice of bhakti, it is essential to perform one's actions with an impartial attitude after carefully considering all these points. That is the end. You chose the perfect moment to pay your obeisances and to make your exit to drive back in the mountainous region of Badger, California. Gaur Premanand. Yes. Haribol, Haribol. Yes. So anyway, that's the end of the fifth quality, Janasangha.
Since I was not here, could you just quickly read, not explain?
The list of 7
Yes.
of Janasanghas. Okay, but first I want to say that tomorrow we'll begin the final of the 6 activities that are unfavorable for bhakti and can destroy bhakti. And that last 6th item is what?
Lowly.
That's right, lowly, restlessness, greed, and desire. We'll cover that. So, by request, we are returning back to the beginning of this section of Janasangha. Yeah. Yes. Where is that? Janasangha. I think it's... Okay, here it is. Just as a prelude to that list, he's mentioning that those who desire to attain Krishna Bhakti must, before all else, renounce the association of persons who are averse to Krishna. This means they should not relate with such persons through the activities of bhakti mentioned in the 4th verse of Upadeshamrita. And what is that? Like giving or receiving gifts, speaking to or hearing from them on any confidential subject matter, feeding them or being fed by them. Conversing with such persons in the course of ordinary worldly dealings, that does not qualify as sangha. Rather, it is considered sangha when such dealings are full of a binding affection, then it's considered Sangha. Now, it is essential for every practitioner of bhakti to know how many types of persons exist who are averse to Bhagavan. Therefore, although we do not desire to do so, we are listing them here. They are of 7 types. Number 1, monists and atheists. They're called Mayavadis and Nastiks. Nastika, that means non-believer, atheist. 2, materialists, Vishayis. 3, those who associate with materialists, Vishayi Sangis. 4, the opposite gender, Yoshit. There's a footnote with that one, which I'm reading. Although the literal translation of the word Yoshit is women, it is apparent from the explanation below that the intended meaning is, quote, inappropriately associating with the opposite gender. So it's not, although it technically, literally means, Yoshit means woman, but the real meaning of listing that word is to inappropriately associate with the opposite gender. Not that women, all women are to be avoided, no, but inappropriate association. And that's the fifth item. And the 6th item is those who make a show of following religious, that was the 4th item, Yoshit. The 5th item, Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Girinari, Shri Shri Radha Govinda Jiyo Ki Jai, Giriraj Govardhana Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Ki Jai, Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai, Shringa Bhagavana Ki Jai. So that was the 5th one is called Yoshit Sangi. The 4th one is called Yoshit, and the 5th one is called Yoshit Sangi, which means to associate with those who illicitly associate with the opposite gender. And then 6, those who make a show of following religious principles, which we read today, Dharma Dwajis. And 7, uncivilized and foolish persons of atrocious conduct. And I said it's like a very classic Sanskrit title being given to that category of persons. Dur achari buddha buddhi antyaja.
It even sounds bad.
Durachari is what we already read today, how Krishna says, apichet sudurachara. Suduracharo. Durachari means a person who is uncivilized and has atrocious conduct. Okay? So, apichet suduracharo. Even if my pure devotee, Bhajate Mamananya Bhak, exhibits some sudurachara. Durachar is bad. Sudurachar means abominable. Yeah. So, and mudha, we sure know what that word means. Mudha buddhi means they're very foolish, very foolish. That's what is being translated here. Uncivilized and foolish persons of atrocious conduct, antyaja. Antyaja also means outcast persons, low class, uncivilized. So that's the list. That's the list, and really, we probably have to read it on our own again, because there's a lot of technical terms and so many different categories, but just as a group, there's a very, very serious reasons why Rupa Goswami has listed this particular Jana Sangha as being that which can destroy our bhakti. So it's very essential. And actually we see in those who are advanced Vaishnavas, they've completely rid their lives of any Jana Sangha. I mean, zero. And we see that Srila Prabhupada stood like a lighthouse in the midst of the whole storm of Kali Yuga, all by himself, in the midst of all of these types of persons, but he did not take their association one iota.
When Allen Ginsberg visited the Columbus, Ohio temple,
Right.
see his friends of Hayagriva.
Yeah.
After he left, they had this nice, pleasant conversation. When he left, Prabhupada said, he is 13th class man.
Yeah, and he was a person of great renown,
Right.
considered a great poet, all these things.
There's one great theme, either Kashipu or Kamsa, who said association is like a gem.
Yes, it's Hiranyakashipu who told that.
Yeah.
Hiranyakashipu, he told
It reflects.
that association acts like a gemstone that has different angles and facets, and it reflects whatever it is near to. It reflects. So that's the problem, is when you associate, then your consciousness and your mind become susceptible. We read that along in these explanations, how Mahaprabhu was saying, don't ever eat food given by materialistic persons, because it will contaminate the consciousness, and when the mind is contaminated, then one cannot think of Krishna. You know. So, you know, in the Kali Yuga, especially living in the West, and depending on like what devotees have to do in their daily lives, especially in the household or ashram and interfacing with materialistic persons, it requires that one takes very good association simultaneously to being exposed to the bad association. Because how was it that Srila Prabhupada was able to remain completely aloof? Because of his pure consciousness. He did not take their association at all. And whose association was he taking constantly? Harinam, Krishna, all the great Vaishnavacharyas. So Janasangha, giving up bad association, also means doing all the 6 favorable things that we'll hear in the next verse. Because without that, there's no possibility of even giving up that association, or even being aware that that association should be given up. Because consciousness becomes so polluted, and by associating with such persons, and we see it amongst the certain sections of our Vaishnava community, we see that they've never really developed. Some of them have never really developed firm faith, conviction, following, practicing, and they're very easily become misguided, you know. We don't even have to get into the details, but we all know.
As far as eating food, that was written in that original thing Prabhupada wrote, do not eat food cooked by non-devotees.
That's right. He was very careful about that.
Yeah, one of the very first things.
And that's why Prabhupada was also very careful about supplying them with the food that would fully satisfy them, so that they would have no urge to go. You know?
Also, it's an offense to the deity to offer deity food that was grains that were cooked by a non-devotee.
Yeah. For the deity that is being worshipped in the temple of the high standard, especially. Yeah, that's not acceptable. Yes. So anyway, bad association, we heard it. It's the most detrimental thing.
So it sounds like the easy way to follow that, it was described either be alone or in the association of devotees.
That's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that.
One of the, but anything else is kind of risky.
And we have to remember that probably this commentary was written by him maybe prior even to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, you know, really launching his Gaudiya Math preaching mission, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur departed from the planet just at the very beginning, you know. So, you know, but Srila Prabhupada presented that that lifestyle of Daivi Varnashram Dharma. He presented that with the Mat. And there you would have certain individuals, brahmacharis, and vanaprasthas and sannyasis. And then the grihastas would be supported by the temple, prasadam would be there, deity worship, everything like that. And so that's the same, you call it template, that Srila Prabhupada introduced for the entire Western world preaching mission, is the Daivi Varnashram system and in the temple. But he modified it in the beginning by need, by necessity. And it was miraculous, because actually in India they'd not heard of that before.
Prabhupada got a lot of criticism from his godbrothers by allowing women
to live in the structure of the temple and so forth, right?
And Prabhupada responded by, they grew up associating with one another, so
in
you
school
can't just
and everything.
artificially separate them.
That's right. And then he also proclaimed this in some of his purports in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And we see that by making this adjustment, the wonderful results, how they are, both of them are engaged in preaching, you know. And we saw that. I mean, we grew up with that. I was telling the story the other day, you know, when I was in Chicago a few months after joining. I was sent to Chicago a couple of months after joining, and all through the whole winter. And we were talking about Bahulasva Prabhu and his wife, Gurudeva, you know, and she was like 7 months pregnant. And her and I went on the train, because somehow others were busy. We didn't have the usual 3 or 4, you know, chanting party persons. And we went together around Christmas time, December 1970. And the two of us came up on the street. And by the way, did you see the photo that came yesterday? I was just looking on my Facebook, and somebody had posted the photo of me in 1971. I'll show it to you. In 1971, on State Street and Madison Street, in the very place. It was a little bit after this, 1971 summer. But I was there through the winter of 70 to 71, autumn and winter and spring and then summer. And in the early summer, Prabhupada returned back from India, and we went up there to Detroit and got initiated and came back. And who's there on the photo with me? Brisa Kapi, I don't know if you know him. Brisa Kapi and Paramahansa, who later became Paramahansa Swami, the three of us. I sent it out to so many devotees. I tried to share it, but it wouldn't share because the devotee who had posted it had some restriction on it. So what I did was I copied it onto my phone, and then from there I shared it. I'll show it to you after we conclude the class. So what was I saying this in context to?
About Karunamayi, you were associated with.
Yeah, how Prabhupada was proclaiming that it was very, very successful, and it was, because in the early days, we even went on Harinam Sankirtan with the ladies, and even traveling Sankirtan. That was a little more rare, but, you know, then the Radha Damodar came, and it was all brahmachari, you know, no women. But in the beginning, we were all preaching together, doing Harinam Sankirtan, everything, you know. And Prabhupada was mentioning this to his godbrothers, that it is not possible to just come and separate, because they have a completely different culture that they grew up in. But we have seen that by engaging them together, the results are very wonderful, you know. And then Prabhupada also liked to boast a little bit about his householder couples who went and did, like, opening up Great Britain itself, you know, which had been attempted by the sannyasis, you know, in the 1930s who went preaching. They were exalted personalities. But somehow or other, you know, the times had changed, and the culture, and these three householder couples launched Krishna consciousness in Great Britain. You know, even Prabhupada wasn't there, and then they met the Beatles and the whole thing, you know. And Srila Prabhupada landed. There's a video of Yamuna telling the memories from that time, and she's saying, and the headlines read, Hare Krishna startles London, or something like that. Hare Krishna startles London. Those were the headlines when Srila Prabhupada landed, after they had done like months and months and months of preaching to set everything up, you know.
And relatively new devotees.
That's right, relatively, like really new devotees, 1, 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, in San Francisco, the same 3 householder couples before they went to Great Britain, they were brand new. Shama Sundar hadn't even met Prabhupada yet, and his college buddy Mukunda came there to tell him about Prabhupada before he was going to fly off to India. That whole story. It's amazing, amazing, amazing stories. And how it was done.
I said that he was even bringing, this was like in late 67, before they left. So he was bringing his dog to the temple. He still had his pet dog.
Oh, yeah. And he's still smoking cigarettes, even when he was carving the Jagannath deities. But when Prabhupada came in, Prabhupada saw the pack, they took his cane and went, knocked it across the room.
The cigarettes are on Lord Jagannath.
Yeah.
But didn't he give him...
And he was smoking while he's doing the carving.
But didn't he give him some instruction about just smoking less and less and
That's
less?
right. And he followed that.
Yeah.
He reduced it each day by 1 cigarette or whatever. Yeah. And then came the time when he's supposed to now do it. And he did it, But I mean, he describes how they were completely into heavy drugs and all of that, So anyway, how it happened is just so miraculous. And really, Srila Gurudev always used to use that term. He has done a miracle. He has done a miracle, But this is the Lord Nityananda, Lord Nityananda Shakti, to his pure devotee, and arranging everything.
A lot of mercy going around at that time.
Oh, yes. It hasn't stopped, though. And we'll see what the next phase. Yes, we're in the midst of a grand revolution. Whatever's going on externally on the political level and all this is just setting the scene. Yeah. And it's going to be so major. But up till now, there's been 5.5 decades, of Krishna consciousness in the West, outside of India, and each decade had its own character, and everything has been developing. All during this time, Mahaprabhu is setting everything up. Even for the last 500 years, from the time of the Renaissance, everything's been getting set up by Mahaprabhu. And right now, what Prabhupada predicted, what Srila Vaman Maharaj predicted, and war, and this and that, it's all coming. All of that's going to take place. There's going to be such a major, auspicious shift, but there's going to be a lot of suffering, But the devotees will all be... Krishna, whatever his will is, the devotees are ready. We're ready. Okay, Krishna, it's up to you. We don't control anything. All we can do is worship you and surrender to you and be completely, completely attached to your lotus feet and to your pure devotees. And whatever you want, my Lord, okay.
We're ready to come back.
Oh, yeah. Whether we're ready or not, Krishna's going to make us ready.
There's a whole second generation that is ready to do
That's
all
true. That's right.
Really hard work.
So, and we're seeing them right now doing the first phase of opening up a major project. So it's all Lord Nityananda doing it. Even the big donation that they got came in a most mysterious way through a person who was the son of another person who had a business associate, a business partner maybe, of a Christian lady, right? The father of a devotee who lives in Premananda's place in Vrindavan, and his name is Balabhadra. That's the name. And the father had an associate, a business associate, and that lady, a Christian, very pious Christian lady, gave a $250,000 donation. Exactly what the amount that was needed to purchase that property. And it came through Balabhadra, which is Balaram, and Balaram is Nitai. Okay. Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Shri Upadeshamritam ki jai, Shri Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai, Shri Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai, Shri Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga ki jai, Sachidanand Gaur Hari ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Vrindai Tulsi Devyai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namah Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. All glory to the assembled devotees. Is it still live, Matsugati? Do we have to stop it?
Thank you all for coming to see and be and hear.
Hari Hari